Good morning and welcome to the PWGC, or actually the PWGC Environmental Echo. I am Paul Boyce, President and CEO of PWGC, the host of the Environmental Echo. And today we've got another a fascinating, exciting guest. Marc Herbst from Long Island Contractors Association is going to be talking about environmental issues and how they relate to, major construction projects here on Long Island in the Nassau-Suffolk region. Just to give you a little bit of background on him, we'll get to that in a second. But before I dive into that, starting off, if you guys have any questions or need to reach us, either during, after, or before this podcast, you can always get us on our website, which is www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. Again, that's the Environmental Echo. And today's guest, Marc Herbst. He is, as I said, the Executive Director of the Long Island Contractors Association. And for those that like acronyms and abbreviation, that's LICA. And I do appreciate that. They're based out of Melville, and they have some real excellent influence in the Regional Trade Association for heavy construction here on the island. Marc has served as that executive director since 2006, correct, Marc?
Yes.
And he oversees the services, programming, labor, and safety training of more than the 170 member firms, and acts as the voice of the industry, both from public and government advocacy. Under his tenure, LICA's role as a major driver of the Long Island economy has grown dramatically in recent years and is responsible for thousands of construction jobs within the region here on Long Island. Marc serves as president of the New York Roadway Infrastructure Coalition. That's NYRIC, another acronym.
NYRIC.
NYRIC. I was going to get to that. That makes it a little bit easier on us. And he's also past chairman of the Council of State Executives for the American Road and Transportation Builders Association. I'd say ARTBA?
ARTBA.
ARTBA. We love acronyms here. And this is something I didn't know, that you were also a 5-term former New York State Assemblyman.
Yes, I served when I was a child. It was a long time ago, over 25 years ago.
Wow, I did not know that. And I'm glad to have known Marc for a number of years through my professional associations. In particular, it was the American Council of Engineering Companies, of which I served as the regional chair, and had the privilege and pleasure to work along Marc with common goals and initiatives. And also joining us today, we have from my office a return guest, kind of like our Ed McMahon to the show here. We've got Charlie Bartha, who is a senior vice president. He's one of the guys that's now heading up our business development efforts, and he's worked with Marc cooperatively over the year on a variety of successful projects. And I want to welcome Marc to the show today, Marc.
Thanks for having me.
No, I'm glad to have you here. And like I said, this is going to be some really, really interesting topics we have to cover. Some that are pretty widely known to many Long Islanders and people of the region. So why don't we dive into some of these topics. Let's start with, you've been involved with infrastructure development across the island. What are the environmental issues that you believe have come to define the region here?
Well, I think the first thing you start with, understand we are an island. We are surrounded by water, and the water has been the backbone, if you will, of the entire economy that we have. We started out as a fishing community, and we built from there. And we are now, one of our strongest industry is tourism, and that's because of the quality of life that we have in the economic system. So we've got to do all that we can to protect those resources. We have to remove the nitrates from the water, install sewers. And often people see construction and the environment as in opposition, and we aren't. We work very closely with our environmental partners and to try to make those improvements, because the people who live here work here, and it's our community. We want to make sure the environment's protected. So it's always in the forefront, and we got to keep that attitude.
Marc, you're singing our praises here as an environmental firm, engineering firm. That's what we strongly believe. That's our mission. We want a sustainable, resilient Long Island. We want it to thrive, prosper, grow. We want opportunity for all of our residents. And I agree that construction is a big part of that. Without that, redevelopment and infrastructure, where would we be?
It absolutely can be done in harmony, and certainly, Marc, you recognize that, and we recognize that. But often, I think we are framed as industry that is not interested in the environment.
Well, that is for sure, and times are changing, though.
That's true,
right? So one of the bigger topics, and I know we've got listeners and viewers they're going to be certainly interested in this because this affects a great number of them. It's the Oakdale merge, right? Efforts are underway to improve the merge. At least we hope they are, right? We haven't seen much yet. I know there's been some repaving over in the area recently, and it's nice, but it's not relieving a lot of the congestion and the issues. What are the traffic impacts? What are the environmental concerns with regard to, like, say, Connecticut State Park over there? But, I mean, the big thing that people are going to be interested in is right off, the traffic. That is just, it's more like the bane of the whole region, or one of them.
Well, you look to put it in perspective. Oakdale Merge is built, and it's also, if you look a mile and a half to the west, the Southern State Parkway ends, and that's one of the three main roads. It ends. So you have 16 lanes collapsing down into 6 to go through that merge. And that's really the congestion that's there each and every day. So the frustration that people experience is because of that. The capacity isn't there. And to compare it to another project, everyone's looking at things that are going on in Queens around LaGuardia Airport, and they've got a major expansion of the Van Wyck Expressway.
Yeah.
A needed project. The Van Wyck Expressway has 134,000 vehicles per day, average annual daily traffic. The Oakdale Merge has 154,000 vehicles per day. And people say, New York City, the highways are there. We've got more traffic being pushed through the Oakdale merge than they do at the Van Wyck, and people don't realize that. That's how significant the project is. And as they were trying to develop programs and for funding at the federal level with the infrastructure money that we pray we will get, one of the projects that the Long Island Regional Planning Board pushed for, one of the 6 major projects, was the Oakdale merge. And we are strongly pushing right now to include funding, at least on the state level, with or without the federal money, for $50 million to start an EIS to get that project moving so we can make the repairs in Oakdale.
I mean, so what are some preliminary or conceptual ideas that may be getting kicked around as to how do we fix this congestion, this traffic tie-up that so many Long Islanders are frustrated with and seem to have to bear the burden of, at least 5 days a week coming and going?
Well, several years ago, the Department of Transportation had a public session where people were invited to come in and give their ideas. It was probably one of the largest turnouts of any public meeting with the DOT hosted on Long Island. And the feedback they got was basically they want it done now. And some of the proposals, as any other environmental study has, is a no-build alternative all the way to double-decking it, as you recommended or suggested. And what we have seen is the cost prices for some of these preliminary projects are between $250 and $750 million. This is a lot of money.
Wow. Yeah.
But the first thing we need to do is do the environmental impact study. And with all the money that we're looking forward to from the federal government, we've talked to the Long Island Regional Planning Council and the New York State DEC and the Environmental Department to talk about funding. And they've come up with 6 major projects. The Oakdale Merge was one of them. And we're asking DOT in at least the next budget, with or without the federal money, to at least expend $50 million to start the EIS to look at that.
Wow. I mean, it's interesting how that section of Sunrise Highway runs, I don't want to say right through the middle of Connecticut State Park, but it's right up against it.
It is. And
to the south, you've got, what's that, Westbrook, and some real sensitive and really pretty, pristine, beautiful environment, How do you go about undertaking a nearly $1 billion project and maintaining that, pristine, beautiful environment, as we just said?
Well, we have to be environmentally sensitive, but we have the engineering expertise to do that. If anything, we may improve and enhance the environment if it's done appropriately. We no longer live in the environment where Robert Moses shows up with the bulldozers in the middle of the night and plows through. It's, again, this is our community, our home. We have to be environmentally sensitive and do it correctly. And if we do that and we have the safeguards in, you're going to improve the air quality because you're not going to have the congestion there. And you can put viaducts and all kinds of different things underneath to connect the wildlife and the aquifer, make sure there's no interruption or runoff, pollutants and things. Those are the things that need to be looked at. And I think we're intelligent enough that we have the sophistication to do what's necessary to make everything overall better than it is today.
But as you realize, Paul, there's plenty of ways to restore habitat, and I'm sure the state will explore all of those, and in the EIS. And maintaining traffic through there while this mega project goes on would be another big undertaking.
Well,
but that's also been done. You look at the Tappan Zee Bridge.
And related to this topic, right, I've had people, oh, you're an engineer, what do you think of this? And it's sort of the future of transportation with electric cars and smart cars and driverless cars. Is this project even going to be necessary? People have approached me with these concepts. I'm not a transportation or highway traffic engineer of any type of sort. I'm a water guy. I didn't know how to answer it.
I believe, I'm a transportation engineer and specializing in, the highway side with the traffic. And what we see is the projections, the traffic will increase. And Long Island, like it or not, has a love affair with the car. What we've gone through with COVID-19, we've seen people wanting more personal space, which means staying in their vehicles. And travel patterns are changing where you're not city-based, the central business district, so the travel patterns will be different. You will be traveling closer to home, and without the mass transit, which we do not have a sufficient system, the increase in vehicles probably will continue, and we're not going to see a cutback. And right now, the Nassau and Suffolk region, Nassau and Suffolk are the only two counties of the 62 counties in the state that each have more than 1 million registered vehicles. So we've got plenty of cars, and they're not going anywhere.
That's an excellent answer, and I agree. I took the Long Island Railroad back in September for the first time since like February of 2020, right, when the pandemic first broke out, and the ridership was still. There was plenty of open seats when I went into the city, when I came out of the city, going through Penn Station. It was really different from the last time I was in there. So I agree. We do have this love affair with the vehicles, and I don't think the pandemic has helped us get away from that whatsoever. If anything, as you pointed out, it's probably furthered our love for them, for the personal space.
I think the important realization here is that there are ways to do it and protect the environment. And this isn't just pushing a major construction project through. So there should be less opposition on the environmental side, and the state makes the commitment, which I'm sure they will, that they have to, the way things are arranged now, the process with the environmental impact statements.
Charlie, I agree, and I'd be very surprised if there's anything short of overwhelming support for this project from an environmental standpoint and from just a public transportation and private transportation standpoint.
Well, I'm not a freshwater fisherman, but apparently it is a very unique habitat there along the Connecticut River. So, it is a real concern, and I'm sure it will be addressed, and that's important.
Well, we are all anxious and looking forward to the project. So moving on, Mark, when we started this podcast, you mentioned that we're on an island. We are surrounded by water. We're sitting on top of our drinking water source. So something that's really important to Long Islanders, or should be, is wastewater infrastructure. And that is front and center for a lot of municipalities here on Long Island. Specifically, we could talk about Suffolk County. There's some real recent interest in this. PWGC is involved. Many of our friends and colleagues are involved, as are the contractors. It's going to be a huge undertaking. They've recently announced funding for developing collection and treatment systems in the Carls River area, the Forge River area, and also the village of Patchogue. What's Leica's perspective on these efforts?
We have been a major supporter, of course, self-interest. We will do the work, but we've worked closely with the environmental groups. And I can't emphasize enough of that. This is our community, and that's really a major driving force. And Steve Ballone, to his credit, pushed for sewers in Suffolk County. It's been since the 1970s, I think, were the last sewers installed, and this is a project that's needed. 75% of Suffolk County is not sewer today.
Yeah.
And so all the wastewater just goes into the ground. It's not being treated. That is not healthy, and it's certainly not for our wildlife. And so this is necessary. We're excited that they had the groundbreaking ceremony in Babylon, so they will be connecting the Calls River section, and Patchogue is a few weeks away, where the contractor will get the notice to proceed. So it's moving forward. And it's not just the three you mentioned. There's others. There's the Smithtown community.
Yep.
Kings Park. There's one in Huntington. So they're all smaller ones, but they're in the design phase, and they are moving forward. And I think it's necessary, and we're really excited about doing these projects.
Oh, so are we. And I'll plug a few more. The Oakdale and Sayville areas, right, Charlie?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's also
Big
and there's also private developments they're going to be putting in their own infrastructure and their own treatment plants, all of which will be terrific.
As with most problems, it's a combination of solutions. It's the centralized sewage treatment plants, which the county expanded Bergen Point a few years ago, and some of these projects are connecting there. You also have all the way down to the innovative alternative systems that we're doing a lot of the engineering on.
Yep.
And some of the townships are requiring based on the proximity to surface waters. So it is, and then what a lot of these new projects are the directional drilling. So you don't disturb as much of the road. They don't have as much of the negative impact that the Southwest Sewer District did on its residents. So it's there's a lot of pieces to the solution.
And it's not just limited to Suffolk County. Nassau County has one of the largest public works projects, the Nassau Conveyance Project, connecting the two sewer plants. That's $550 million. It's just amazing. And that's going to help the flow and the overall system, be more efficient. So we're looking forward to that project, which is now underway. So that's exciting as well. And
that's a really great project, using a 100-year-old water transmission line that was not being used underneath Sunrise Highway, and putting a pipe through that to transmit the
so it's getting
sewage.
Repurposed.
Yeah,
it's great.
Yeah,
it's great, and not to mention the outfall at Bergen Point.
Mm-hmm.
Every time I go down Ocean Parkway, I see him, set up on the north side of the barrier island with the pit and the drilling and everything else. Talk about boring or directional drilling. I mean, that thing's massive. It's also I don't know, is it $1 billion project or something, or multi-billion?
Yeah, well,
it's huge.
Yeah, it was a very big project, and again, it was using techniques that weren't available 50 years ago when it was done. First time.
I mean, the improvements that we're looking forward to, the benefits will be reaped, and it may be a long time before we see, a fully sewered Nassau and Suffolk County. But once it is, it will also take a long time for what's already made its way to the groundwater to dissipate. So no time like the present to get started, I suppose.
You're right. And the environmental benefits are obvious, but also the economic input. How right now, you can't get a permit to open a new shop, a retail thing, a restaurant, and this gives the opportunity to have some economic development. So, which is more encouraging for people to open businesses and stay on Long Island. Gives you job opportunities.
Yep, and additional places to live. If we can develop smartly in our downtowns, which we've seen in some areas like Patchogue and others, it's sky's the limit, I guess, if we can do it right. So something else I wanted to talk about, and this is probably a broad topic, but it pertains to our region's road network, and it's critical for many, many reasons. You mentioned the economy and tourism and everything else, but you guys play a preeminent role in advocating for the funding and improvement of the regional road network system. How would you describe the present condition of Long Island's roads?
I think people should be very concerned. It's like the roof of your home. You don't pay attention to it until it starts leaking. And if you look, particularly our residential streets, you look at our neighborhood roads, you go outside, that's the first thing you see. And if we look at the history of how Long Island was built, it was subdivision by subdivision. And most of those developers who put in those homes, residential areas, were required to build the streets. Think of when your home was built in that neighborhood. They haven't been replaced other than during the sewer construction program, again, which ended around 1980. Those roads haven't been replaced since then. If they haven't been properly maintained, and most of them because of money and the taxes that people don't want to pay, they're paying enough, so the cutbacks have been deferred maintenance. So what you have seen is an infrastructure, a system where a road is bonded, municipal bonds, for about 30 years, similar to a home mortgage. They're beyond that expectancy. Our roads now, that were funded to last 30 years, are now 40, 50 years old. If they all start deteriorating at the same time, what are we going to do?
Yeah, right.
And that's what we're really approaching at this point. So we are in an ideal time when the federal government is talking about spending money on infrastructure. We've got the needs. We can use the money here.
One of the things that LICA does that I think is really invaluable is the survey of all the municipalities on Long Island and the disparity between some of the towns and villages and counties as to how much they spend, and you present it in a per capita fashion. It's very good information.
Yeah, we did this recommendation we took across the board. Everything was objective compared about information that they provided from their budgets to the state controller. So we can tell you how much each municipality spent per lane mile or per resident. And then to tell the elected officials as they're putting together their budgets, where do you stand and compare to your neighboring town? And when you see the figures at the low end, we had the town of Riverhead extremely low. Now, if you look at the condition of the roadways and you look at the neighboring town that's spending more, well, now you've got to make adjustments and decide what your priorities are. But we've given them the data to make those decisions.
So where does besides taxing the local residents, where does the funding come from? Is it from the federal government? Is it grants? How do they go about, what's the solution? How do they get the money?
Again, it's the priority. With school, everyone jumps up and down and screams for school aid. And I'm not attacking schools. We need as much as we can get from the state. On the highway side, it's called the CHIPS program. For the last 5 years, last year there was a slight increase, but before that it was Long Island. All the municipalities on Long Island in total received $40 million from the state of New York. There were over 17 school districts in Suffolk County alone that each received more than $40 million in state aid for their schools. Now, that's very telling. And I'm not disparaging schools, but that's ignoring the need for the highway infrastructure when that's all you're getting from the state. And the state overall budget, only 2% is spent for operations for transportation. So it's a matter of telling your officials what is your priority, and we have to advocate stronger and louder.
Roads are a very important part of the economy and supporting the economy. And so without that, you have more traffic. Without supporting it, you have more traffic. Cars are running longer and you get more pollution. So it really does tie into the environment as well.
So in terms of the conditions of the roads, is it just we need to resurface, mill and fill, or do we need to really reconstruct these things, come up with better drainage, not just curb and gutter type things, and the highways, is it using different types of materials that are stronger, last longer? What are the solutions, Mark?
It's a combination of all. It depends on a particular situation. If you look at the parkway system on Long Island, built in the 1920s, we don't know where half the drains are. If there's a failure, if a collapse, DOT over time has just filled them in with sand. They don't have the drawings from the original design. We don't know where the underground pipes are. And to do a massive study just to figure it out how to do that. You talk about climate change. We have, once in 100 storm that's happening every other year.
Yep.
Things are bad. The drains are not being cleaned and maintained. That's causing a lot of problems, and these are issues that certainly need to be addressed. And I actually wrote an editorial in Newsday not too long ago about how that has to be funded, and we have to look at that and make those repairs.
I did recall reading the article or the editorial. So you brought it up, and this is the $2 trillion gorilla in the room, I guess, and I've got to bring it up. We're here. We are at the beginning of November 2021. There's been talk of this infrastructure bill for easily the last year, maybe longer. It looks and it hopes to be finalized soon, and something may come out. How do you see that affecting the region? What are going to be the benefits for Long Island?
Well, the largest public works program that the federal government ever funded was the interstate highway system. That was $500 million. What they're talking about now, if it goes through, and supposedly today as we tape, it's supposed to be before the Congress, and we'll see if that happens or not. But the program for the infrastructure is $1.2 trillion. That's 4 times higher than they spent on the entire interstate highways in today's dollars.
Right.
So that's a lot of money. But what does that mean for the region? They want this to start right away. So the funding formulas that exist today, if you just pump more dollars in there, it will bring about a 30% increase in dollars for Long Island over the next 10 years. That's a significant increase.
I was going to say, talk about a return on investment,
Yes.
right? And another boon would be, you and I were talking before the podcast here. Is I was attending the American Council of Engineering Companies fall conference last week in Florida, and obviously this is a hot topic. It's going to affect not only the contractors industry but the engineering industry. They pointed out if this comes to fruition over the next 10 years, we'll need an additional 80,000+ engineers, right? We're already having a capacity problem. I'm sure the LICA members are hopefully very busy, just like the engineering industry. How do you see this affecting the labor market?
I think it's going to be an attraction to bring young people into the field. Baby boomers are aging out; they're retiring. On top of the additional work, so that's something we have to look at. So we have to put together programs to attract people to the industry. But as far as job creation as well, infrastructure jobs, for every job we create, the ripple effect is 3 additional jobs. The finance industry, every job they create on Wall Street, the ripple effect is 2 jobs. So we create more jobs. So this is an opportunity to really pump money into the economy. We'll get better infrastructure, new jobs. It's just right across the board. Everything's going to be an improvement. So we're really excited about that. But the work in the industry is necessary. The other thing, if I don't, on the government side, Public Works, they hire us to do the work, and we're concerned about the engineers and contractors having the appropriate levels of staffing. Government needs to know and understand they've got to increase the people to do in-house work as well, to do the monitoring and inspections. So if they're not prepared, if they're not able to pay the bills because they don't have the administrative staff to handle the paperwork, the invoicing, and the billing, that's going to be a problem as well. So across the board, public and private, we've got to have the proper levels of employment.
I'm going to see a little bit of a capacity issue coming up, until this thing really gets going. And you pointed out it could be at the DOT, the DPW level, the state DEC, all of ththose agencies, right? They've got to start being prepared to gear up for it as well. I'm really looking forward to it, but it's going to be a challenge.
Yeah.
As I've said, we're having a hard time finding engineers right now. Not just PW Grosser, but industry-wide. And, just looking for more in the future, we can't meet the capacity that we have at the moment. It's tough to keep up. Like I said, it's a challenge. It's a good problem to have, but It's still a challenge. Okay. I do want to wrap up with, something more on the personal side with you, Mark. We know you're involved with a lot of different variety of charities and foundations. Can you tell us about your efforts with the Gino Macchio Foundation, please?
Well, that's a young man who went through some difficult times, and he lost his life, and it was an inspiration for what he did in the industry. And we are involved. Our organization supports many activities in the nonprofit agency because, again, we are part of the community, and we have an effort to lift up people's lives and help different organizations. We jump to the task as we're proud of the companies that are members of our firms, and we had one of our members come to us and ask us to get behind this event, and we proudly did so. And it's just wonderful to, again, support the community and the personal needs and the charities that are out there. So many people are doing good things on Long Island, and we're just proud to be part of it, encourage others to do the same.
That's a great way to end the podcast here, and I couldn't agree with you more. People need to get out there and be involved, be an active a member of the community, and through a foundation like Gino's, that is very noble.
Yes.
Charlie, anything you want to add before we wrap up today?
No, just like to thank Mark for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mark, thank you for your time. And I just want to wrap up with our listeners. I want to thank them for listening or viewing and listening if you're on the internet. Again, you want to reach out to PW Grosser. It is through www.pwgrosser.com/podcast. Again, I'm your host today, Paul Boyce, President and CEO of the firm. And I want to thank you again for joining us and listening on this really interesting topic with Marc Herbst to the road to success here for Long Island and the environment. Thanks again.